Okay, so this is the second video in this series about nutrition and diets. This is probably the one that most of you are wanting to see about, is my opinion on what the best diet is. So hopefully through this video you'll kind of get a bit more understanding on what I feel is the best diet for people. We'll talk a little bit about diet culture in general. So going into the sort of dieting side of things, dieting tends to be when people want to lose weight. That's quite a loaded term in itself, which I'll discuss later. But yeah, you've got diets like the keto diet, you've got Weight Watchers, Slimming World, there was discussion about chemical diets, there's probably eat only red food diets, there's probably eat every third day diets. There's these juice diets, there's the cabbage soup diet, there's the intermittent fasting diet. So there's a whole range out of diets out there, and it all gets really confusing, and you hear all these stories about so-and-so Mary down the road has lost X amount of weight through this diet, and oh, my friend's on this and they're really sort of losing the weight, and you've got all these scientific studies that are showing that this happens and that happens, and it all gets really confusing and muddy, and you just don't know where to start or what to believe. So I'm hoping that this video will help kind of just give a little bit more guidance around this. One of the things with diets is they are tools, shall we say, okay? Pretty much all of them will help you lose weight. I'm going to say the word weight. This will come into play later on, okay? So they will all pretty much help you lose weight, but it's the sustainability of this, okay? So you might see the results from certain diets and they show these before and after pictures, but it's usually a few weeks after. Do you get to see the 6 months, a year, 2 years later? More often than not, if you were to see that, you would probably see that the person has actually put that weight back on, and more often than not, more weight as a consequence of these diets, and the fact that they don't create sustainable habits and practices, and a lot are maybe not as healthy for the body as they should be, and can do quite a bit of damage in some respects. So I will go into a video later on about what to look out for red flags wise for diets, and also the best strategies for your diets. But going back to diet in general, for me, the most important thing is looking at the fact that you need to understand what your goals are for your diet, okay? Weight loss, that seems to be the big thing. Everyone wants weight loss. What you don't realize maybe is that the weights on the scale can go down, but you're not actually doing what you're probably wanting, which is fat loss, okay? So people that want to lose weight, quote unquote, it's more often that they actually want to lose fat, because you can lose weight without losing fat. And that's the thing about the scales, is you can see that weight go down on the scales, but you're not necessarily actually losing fat. And that's what a lot of these crash diets and things that happen with these, it's actually that massive loss at the start is actually loss of things like water. You lose a lot of water. So 70% of our body or so is made up of water. So with these diets and these crash diets, fad diets, a lot of that weight loss initially is from losing water. A lot can be from loss of the stored carbohydrates in your body as well. So you're not actually losing fat within that. It is that weight is from these things more often than not. Okay, so that's the thing that you've got to be really careful about, is concentrating too much on scale weight. Using scales, I've jumped from one camp to the other of the importance of scales. Scales provide a measure, but we tend to attach a lot of feelings and emotions to scales. And for some people, it can be really detrimental to focus too much on the scales because they become obsessed with this number and they worry about every fluctuation. But as I said, these fluctuations, a lot of it comes from just water loss. It can also be whether you've been to the toilet or not before these, because it's amazing how much that can change your how much the scales are. It could be due with, well, did you eat a heavy meal before you went to bed and you're weighing in the morning and it's still sitting in your stomach? All these different factors. Time of the month for women, that can make all the difference. But we tend to see these scale weights as, oh my God, I've put on fat, I've put on fat, I've put on fat, if we see it go up. But there's going to be natural fluctuations. It depends on the time of day that you weigh yourself. It also depends on what clothes you're wearing at the time. So there's going to be natural fluctuations. So you need to remember that when you're using this as a metric to guide your measurements for tracking progress. I was trying to think of an analogy for this, so it might not work because me and many analogies would probably make no sense. But it's a bit like a bank balance, okay? So you want to look at your bank balance to make sure that you're in a healthy bank balance. You're not, in the red, as it were. You've got enough money in the bank. And it's like saying that you are going to use the scale of how much wage you get paid a month to track that. Okay, so yeah, it's going to give you some information. It's going to tell you how much money's coming into your bank, but it's not taking into account all the other things that go on with your bank, the expenditures, your rent, the food that you had to buy with your money. You maybe spent it on clothes. You've gone and maybe got some birthday money, so that's added more money into it. So there's a whole range of different factors that affect your bank balance at the end of the day, not just the wage that you are getting in. So that was kind of my analogy that I thought maybe would help make more sense. So just to remember that there's so many other factors that go on to your scale weight. Okay, it's not necessarily a gauge of fat loss. It does give you some way of tracking things. And I think if you're able to handle dealing with weight without putting too much emotions behind it, whether you put on weight or lose weight on the scale weight, I think that's important. And that's a gradual process, and you've got to think about knowing yourself and how you handle these things and watching that you don't become obsessed with the scales. So they can be useful to track things. So I would recommend, if you were to do that, that you keep consistency on when you weigh yourself, what you're wearing, time of day, the same scales in the same place, just to kind of keep at least as much of the measures that you can control the same, so that you can get a little bit more accurate picture. And remember, it will fluctuate. There's so many different factors. So the best way is to compare week 1 of one month with week 1 of the next month, and use that as kind of your tracker, because then that takes into account some of the hormonal sides of things as well. And also do averages rather than day by day. So, average it out to see what it was for that week. What was the average? Was it up? Was it down compared to the month before? And just bear in mind that there can be fluctuations in that way. So in terms of what the best diet for you is, for me, I think it's the one that you can sustain and keep consistency through. Yeah, so sustainability and consistency. Because if you're following some of these crash diets where you're on a crazy low amount of calories a day, it's not sustainable. You can't keep that up. It's not healthy for you mentally or physically. And that basically, this is why people go from that binge and restrictive cycle, that they go on these restrictive diets and then as soon as they come off them, they go into this binge and they end up just putting on the weight straight away, or even more so. And also it can screw up your metabolism, these yo-yo diets of coming in and out of them and the extremes, and mentally that restriction plays a lot. It's like, that old adage of, if you think tell someone not to think about the white elephant in the room, they'll start thinking about it all the time. So it creates that unhealthy relationship with food, and seeing it as something that needs to be sort of demonized as well. This good versus bad food, that's another thing that seems to be promoted in a lot of these diets. So you can't have that because it's bad for you. Again, I've spoken about this before, that everything in moderation I think is important. You've got to be able to live your life. You can't let your this sort of your diet run your life and affect your lifestyle. I think it's important that you're able to still go out with friends and have a meal without stressing so much that, oh, if I eat that, that's going to really throw my diet out of whack, and that's it, it's all over. This all or nothing mentality. So to me, it's about consistency. What can you do consistently, and what can you sustain? So think about the foods you enjoy and just how you can incorporate them into your diet. So you need to be self-aware, I think, is an important thing, of what's your personality type. Can you have these foods that you maybe struggle with and aren't as optimal for your goal? So say you have a lot of processed food, say biscuits and stuff like that, and you know that it's maybe not quite as optimal for your diet because they're not going to give you that satisfaction in terms of making you feel full. And they may give you that sugar spike, so it's going to make you want more food. You might be the kind of person that's able to take just one biscuit and cope, or you could be a person that once you have that one biscuit, that's it, that whole packet is gone. So it's about that awareness and thinking about alternatives. So sometimes if you're one of these all or nothings, it might be finding something that does give you satisfaction that could be an alternative. So thinking about different replacements. So there's plenty of ways that you can make maybe healthier alternatives, like using, well, we've seen it, the cheesecake with cauliflower, but it's things like that. Using some of these like cabbage leaves instead of wraps, and that's going to cut down on the amount of calories that you're maybe consuming, and also give you some more veg in the day, as well as being more nutrient dense and making you feel fuller, so you don't need to eat as much. So it's things like that are important. And it's about identifying where your sticky situations are. What is these trigger foods that you maybe struggle with, and thinking about more behind that. So that psychology behind it. Again, that's something that I'm going to do a video on, is about the psychology and the sort of behaviours and habits and things like that. But that's something to be really aware of. The emotions, what plays into that, and putting these little strategies in place to help you with that. And that's where people within your circle, your family circle, your friend circle, or coaches can come and help you with creating strategies that might help overcome some of these things that you maybe often fall foul of, that maybe aren't helping towards whatever goal you have, be that to put on muscle or to lose fat or just to maintain the weight that you are. But if you can have a diet that you are able to have some of the things that you enjoy and not feel guilty, I think that's the most important thing. Food, as I said, isn't good or bad. You shouldn't have the guilt around having something that you enjoy. At the same time, it's not mindless. So you do have to think about what you're eating and the nutrients that you're getting from this. But, you can't just go, oh, I'm never going to have pizza because that's so bad for me. You can have pizza. It's just about being mindful about how much you have and whether it fits with what you're doing for that day or that week. And remembering as well the fact that don't feel guilty if you fall off the wagon, as it were. It's like one day of overeating does not make you fat. It's what you do consistently. So if you always overeat every single day, then you're having more calories in than you're burning, and that's going to put on fat because you've got excess resources that you aren't needing. So it's not that one day of overeating a crazy amount is now that's it, diets, your goals are over, you've lost it, you've blown it. That's the equivalent of saying with a car, you've got a flat tire, and because you got one flat tire, you might as well slash the rest of them because that's it, you can't fix it. It's just about rethinking about, well, okay, so I didn't follow what I was set out to do nutrition wise today. Tomorrow's another day. But again, don't keep that perpetual thing of, oh, tomorrow's another day, tomorrow's another day, tomorrow's another day. Because if you consistently keep sabotaging your own nutrition, then obviously that's going to add up and kind of not help towards your final goal. So this is just something that I want to be aware of. So for me, the best diet is the one that fits you and your lifestyle and allows you to sustain it, be consistent, because if you aren't able to consistently do it every day, then that leads to that binge and restrictive cycle where you aren't happy either, really. I think it's important here to talk about diets in terms of, as I said, most diets that you see will lead to some weight loss. But they go with it, the fundamental principle, okay, so this is the principle that underlines all of these, is that in order to lose weight, the energy in, so the calories that you consume, so calories is your currency, so that's, let's say it's the money that you use for your spending, the calories in, so the energy in order to lose weight, needs to be less than the calories that you use. So it's the energy equation balance. Okay, so that's the basic principle that these diets work on. It's just that they use different tools in order to get that. So they use different, well, you know, the marketing side of things. So it might be that they promote the juice diet type thing where you're only going to drink juices for many of your meals. But fundamentally, they are working on the premise that you're going to be given less calories than you're actually burning. Okay? And I'll go into a little bit more about that in the next video about the balance equation, because this one's already long enough as it is, and you're probably already like, oh my god. All right, so I will move on to the next video, so feel free to watch this if that's of interest.